Welcome in, everybody. Thursday night edition, Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. I am back. So producer Matt and I were traveling on Tuesday and Wednesday. We got some wild content for you in the coming days. Producer Matt is actually in the air as we speak, but I felt like we could not go another day without a full episode of the Aaron Torres Pod because it has been a busy week. And we got ourselves a jam-packed Thursday show. We're going to talk NBA Draft Combine. It's actually still going on right now. I think we've gotten a ton of storylines. If you missed the show a few days ago, Boogie Fland is out. We talked about him. Today, we basically talk about everybody else. Arizona with Carter Bryant. I think Tommy Lloyd completely, misused Carter Bryant. We're going to discuss that. Yaxel Lendeborg, two different interesting updates that need to be discussed. What the heck's going on at North Carolina? They lose another player. We're going to talk about what they need to do to salvage this offseason. Then we'll go through some quick hitters. Otega, Oweh, Cedric Coward, who else? Carter, Knox, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of updates from the NBA Draft Combine. From there, we will talk about this. Mark Pope had a press conference earlier this week. He dropped an unbelievable line. I want to discuss that and what it means for the present and future of Kentucky basketball. Oh, by the way, John Calipari on a road show this week. Now, Calipari did get a very nice commitment right before we went on air. We'll discuss that. But he also shared some very interesting thoughts. And I think a thought that kind of, I don't want to say polarized the fan base, but I think he said something about next year's roster that I do think to a degree has divided the fan base. So we'll get to all that. By the way, I'm riding solo today. No producer Matt. As I said, he is in the air. We're going to have great content for you next week. If there's any issues with the sound, with the this, with the that, you got to let me know because I'm riding solo here. My security blanket of producer Matt is somewhere probably over like Iowa right now. Okay. Anyway, before we get started, a couple quick reminders. One, make sure you are subscribed to the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. New clips, new videos going up every single day. I think we have done a great job of keeping things consistent in May. We had Reese Potter on earlier this week. We had, of course, Jaden Quaintance. Two big guests coming in the next 2 weeks, so stay tuned to that. If you are not subscribed, please make sure to do so. Also, make sure you're subscribed on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You are going to want to make sure that you are subscribed to the Aaron Torres Pad. By the way, let's get the chat going here. Drop your thoughts on the Combine, on the season ahead. If there's a football thought, we'll get to all of your questions and comments in just one moment. Also, before we get started, one last thing. You know what I got to do? I got to thank our friends. I got to thank our partners. I got to go ahead and thank Cauley Puffs and CauleyPuffs.com. Okay, so I've told you all about Cauley Puffs. It's that time of year. It's beach season. It's lake season. It's pool season. It is mow the lawn with your shirt off season, and you do not want to look like a filthy slob when you're sitting on your John Deere, driving all around town, okay? So what you need is a snack that is both healthy but delicious. My friends, you need Cauley Puffs. I've told you about Cauley Puffs. First of all, I love the story. Family-owned company, not far from where I live. Joey, huge football fan, huge sports fan. He was part of our Aaron Torres Pod Survivor Pool, and he was sitting on the couch one day and said, man, I need a snack that is both healthy but delicious. I'm watching football. I also need a snack that my kids are going to love, that I'm going to love, that my parents are going to love. He came up with Cauley Puffs. Baked, not fried, avocado oil, no grease, healthy ingredients. The best part is they taste delicious. By the way, you don't got to take my word for it. People in the chat have tried them. I know a lot of you have tried them. We appreciate your support. But if you have not tried Cauley Puffs, now's a heck of a time to do so. For more information, this is what I need you to do. Go to CauleyPuffs.com. That's CauleyPuffs.com. 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 You can search Cauley Puffs. Also on Amazon.com as well. Just search Amazon.com. You can find Cauley Puffs there. We appreciate their support of the Aaron Torres Pod. With that said, it's actually a very, very, very busy week in the world of sports, in the world of basketball. There is no more time to waste, so let's go ahead and get to the topic of the day. Topic of the day, NBA Draft Combine is going on right now, literally actually as we speak, okay? And I know the NBA Draft Combine on the grand scheme of things in the world of sports maybe isn't the biggest storyline going on, but look, as far as the impact that it can have on college basketball next year, This is a huge couple days. You have guys that go in as relative unknowns that get first-round guarantees. You think they're going to be a cornerstone at a major school. Boom, they're gone. That school's scrambling. You have guys that you think for sure are gone. They don't play well. They decide to come back. They turn into All-Americans. So the point that I'm trying to make is that you just never know what's going to end up at the NBA, what's going to end up happening at the NBA draft combine. And so I solely bring it up because, this is the time of year where largely rosters are being set for 2025, 2026, and some of the best players in college basketball are making their big decisions. And so what I want to do now is I want to talk about 3-4 of the biggest storylines. And I do want to start with what I believe to be the most impactful piece of news over the last couple days. And it actually came from a player that many of you might not be super familiar with. It is a player named Carter Bryant who played at Arizona this year, okay? So listen, if you just looked at Carter Bryant's stats on a stat sheet, you would sit there and say, okay, Torres, who is this? Why does it matter? Blah, 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 this and that. Well, I bring it up because if you actually watched Arizona, this kid was a bona fide stud, okay? He, quote unquote, only averaged 6.5 points per game. But I think part of it was, Tommy Lloyd, and we're going to talk about this, believe me, always kind of favors the veteran players. He tries not to rush freshmen along. But if you watch this kid, 6'8", shoots the crap out of the ball, 37% three-point shooting. I have said many times, I believe I was at UConn when Rudy Gay was at UConn, okay? Now, Rudy Gay might not seem like a big name to you, but I am here to tell you, Rudy Gay was a all-Big East player at UConn, and oh, by the way, played 18 years in the NBA. And Carter Bryant reminds me identical of him, now 20 years ago. And so I just bring it up because to me, Carter Bryant was one of the more fascinating NBA draft stay or go decisions. If he stays, and we're going to discuss it, I think Arizona would have been maybe the number one team in the country, and I think he blossoms into an All-American. If he leaves, it's bad news. Well, we got the news on Wednesday night, that Carter Bryant is officially all in on the 2025 NBA draft. I think he is going to go much higher than a lot of people think. I actually think he's going to end up being a top 10 pick, but I want to discuss what happened at Arizona. And frankly, did Tommy Lloyd, a guy that I have a great deal of respect for, did he misuse Carter Bryant and frankly not use him enough? Okay, so first of all, again, got the itchy nose. I don't know what the hell is going on. I was in the air. I was flying this morning, so maybe I got allergies or something. Anyway, so Carter Bryant, as I said, 6'8" forward, really good. Okay, and so what's interesting to me about him is, like I said, I think he was one of the most underrated players in all of college basketball. I've given you the stats. I've given you the intangibles, but he only played about 18, 19 minutes a game. And this isn't me, by the way, with revisionist history talking about why didn't he play more. There are tweets out there during the season where I said, if I was Tommy Lloyd, I would be playing Carter Bryant literally as many minutes as I possibly could. I think he was that good. I thought he was a little bit misused. And as he has entered the NBA draft, I said, look, he is going to enter the NBA draft. And if he were to come back to Arizona, I said, I believe he will be not only like, let me put it this way. Let me backtrack. Okay. So he enters the NBA draft. I said that night, I said it was bad news. I said, if he because he played so little, what you want in a perfect world is for him to say, you know what, I'm not ready. I haven't had enough experience, whatever. But the day that he entered the draft, we were live on air. I said, that's bad news for Arizona, because what's going to end up happening is he's going to be wooed by these NBA teams. He's going to get away from campus. He's going to this, he's going to that, he's going to whatever. And what's going to end up happening with Carter Bryant is NBA teams are going to realize how good he is, and he ain't coming back to college basketball. And so if he had come back, I truly believe in my heart of hearts, I think you could have argued Arizona would have been the number one team in the country next year, okay? And we're not going to spend a ton of time on the Arizona depth chart today because we got all offseason to do that. But Jaden Bradley, former McDonald's All-American, third-year player at Arizona, fourth-year player in college basketball. He might be the best point guard in the Big 12. He's going to be right up there with Rob Wright from BYU. Who else? I'm trying to think. Darren Peterson at Kansas, certainly. Jaden Bradley is going to be there. Koa Pete, 5-star McDonald's All-American. Braden Burries, 5-star McDonald's All-American. Toby Awaka, etc. But the one thing that I don't see on that roster is a true superstar, and that's what I believe Carter Bryant would have been. I believe with a year of college basketball under his belt, with a year of understanding the pace and the speed and the whatever, I think we are talking about a guy that could have potentially been Big 12 Player of the Year and on top of it, a first-team All-American. And what I was thinking about today, sometimes you have All-Americans that are just really good college players. You know, Braden Smith was an All-American. Doesn't mean he's going to be a great NBA player. But sometimes you have All-Americans who are basically NBA players playing in college. That's what Cooper Flagg was this year. It's what Paolo Banchero was. It's what John Wall was. That's what I think he could have been next year. And so as I look at the bigger picture of a kid that goes into the draft after averaging 6.5 points per game, but I think he's going to go in the top 10. I think every mock I've seen has him about top 15. And to me, I think there is a fair question of, did Tommy Lloyd essentially waste a season of Carter Bryant playing at Arizona this year? Now, I think there's two separate conversations, to be fair to Tommy Lloyd, because I have heard two different things from Arizona fans. One, I've heard this notion of Tommy Lloyd should have tried to convince him to come back. I don't agree with that. But do I think Tommy Lloyd could have gotten more tread on those tires when he was in Tucson? I absolutely do. But I do think there is, in fairness to Tommy Lloyd, a difference between the two. Now, let me put it this way. I don't think any coach should ever be trying to convince a player to come back that has legitimate top 5, maybe not top 5, but top 10, top 15 potential, okay? Now, if the player wants to come back, if the player doesn't want to test the NBA draft waters, then that's fine. I'll give you an example. I don't want to spoil too much of what's coming these next few weeks, but Richie Saunders at BYU. I talked to Kevin Young about him, the BYU head coach, and Kevin Young said, listen, we know what Richie's potential was as an NBA player, and I never once told him, what he should do. I just said, hey, if you come back, this is what it's going to look like with AJ DeBonsa, with all the guys that we've signed. But if you decide to go pro, this is what I've heard from my contacts across the NBA. And so to me, that's what a coach should do. A coach should not be trying to convince a player to come back. Whenever you're trying to convince somebody of doing something that they're already 50-50 on, generally doesn't work out very well, right? Could make a bunch of analogies about bad first dates that you didn't really want to go on, but somebody convinced you to go on. And then next thing you know, it's Applebee's and you got a bill and you're like, why am I even here? Why am I at Applebee's right now? I wouldn't say that's the exact Carter Bryant situation, but it's kind of what I'm saying. And so I don't believe Tommy Lloyd should have convinced him to try and come back. Lay out the options, do whatever, and let him decide for himself. He's an 18-year-old kid, 19-year-old kid. He's going to be in a grown man's league. If he thinks he's ready, then that's his prerogative. By the way, I think it goes without saying, would be really bad for recruiting if it comes out that you're trying to convince kids that could be first-round picks to return to college basketball for selfish reasons. Probably not going to help your cause. At the same time, though, let me say this. Do I think that Tommy Lloyd could have gotten more out of Carter Bryant while he was on campus? I do. And, I don't want to say it, but I'm going to say it anyway. I do think it's a little bit of a cautionary tale for players who want to go to Arizona. It's not a knock on Tommy Lloyd. I love that staff. That staff is awesome. And they just landed 2 McDonald's All-Americans, so they're recruiting fine. But at the same time, I always say this. I say, really, in my opinion, there's two types of coaches in college basketball. There are the ones that are always going to trust the veterans, rely on the veterans, and basically say, listen, if you're a freshman and you're not ready and you're going to hurt us and you're going to make mistakes, we're not playing you. Bill Self is famous for that. Bill Self would rather play a fifth-year senior that he totally believes in than the 5-star McDonald's All-American. Go back through Bill Self's career. He's never been good with 5-star kids straight out of high school because he just doesn't trust them. Roy Williams was that way. Jay Wright was. I remember getting in a fight with Villanova fans because I was like, if my son was a one and done, I would not send him to Villanova. Then there's the other kind of coach. John Shire, Coach K previously, John Calipari. Listen, you can criticize John Calipari for whatever, but when John Calipari has a 5-star kid and knows I am only getting a year out of this kid, Calipari throws him into the fire, lets him play through his mistakes, and Calipari's stance, and we can argue how successful it's been the last couple years, is basically his stance is, look, I don't care if you make mistakes in November and December if that's going to get you ready for March when I need you the most. I can go through a million examples, but the one that sticks out to me, I remember early in Tyler Hero's freshman year at Kentucky. Tyler Hero was struggling to shoot the ball. Now, he was still, even when he was struggling, he was getting 12, 13, 14 points a night, but it might be on 3 of 9 3-point shooting, 2 of 7 3-point shooting, whatever. And so at the time, people were like, you can't play this kid. He's not shooting the ball well. And Calipari just kept throwing him out there, kept throwing him out there, kept throwing him out there. Next thing you know, he's one of the best players in college basketball come mid-February into March. Successful season. He goes on to be a lottery pick. And so Tommy Lloyd, he comes from that Mark Few tree where, they'll play freshmen if they're one of the best players, Chet Holmgren, Jalen Suggs at Gonzaga. But the counter to that is that if you're not 100% ready, they're not going to throw you into the fire. And I think it cost Arizona this year. Listen, again, this isn't an Arizona depth chart conversation, but, listen, I hate picking on kids, but Arizona fans that are watching this know the facts. There was a veteran player on that roster that got a lot of minutes solely because he was a veteran, and he really struggled, and he never really figured it out. And I just wonder, if you threw Carter Bryant into the fire earlier, is that a dude that by the time you get to March, all of a sudden is playing at an elite level and showing more of the potential that we saw throughout the season, right? Because you look at Arizona, listen, they played everybody tough. I mean, they played Houston tougher than everybody. They played Duke tougher than Alabama did in that East Regional. But could they have used one more guy? Could they have used a star? And by the way, could they have used a star that they were probably going to lose? Yeah, I think they could. So does it change their season? I don't know. I don't know if Carter Bryant was even at the peak of his powers if they could have beaten Duke in that East Regional. But I just look back, and I do think this is going to be a season that Arizona fans look back on and say, damn, we had that dude. And by the way, people, I haven't even looked at the chat, but I guarantee people are saying, oh, Torres, he averaged 6 points. He's not good. Just telling you, right now, it's May 15th. NBA draft is super late this year. I think it's like May 27th or something, 28th. I only bring it up because let's go back and look. I think this kid ends up going top 10, but I think it was a largely wasted season by Arizona, and it stinks because this kid was so special. And we could all see it. We could all see it. You knew you were going to lose him. You knew if he entered the NBA draft, he wasn't coming back. Well, that's exactly what happened. Arizona, by the way, to its credit, listen, they're going to have a contingency plan. I think they'll probably go European. They'll try to find probably an older player, 20, 21 years old, to replace Carter Bryant at that 3. And I still think they're good. Jaden Bradley, again, Koa Pete, Braden Burries. But I think he was the piece that would have put them over the top. He was the piece. I would have had them minimum top 3, maybe number 1 in the country. Unfortunately, we'll never know. All right, so what I want to do, I want to take a quick break. I want to come back. When we come back, I want to go ahead and that's what I want to do. I want to go ahead and talk about some of the other draft combine news and notes. Yaxel Lendeborg with 2 separate, very interesting updates throughout the week. UNC getting a little weird there as they lose another guy to the NBA draft. And oh, by the way, on top of that, do want to talk about Otega, Oweh, Carter, Knox, Cedric Coward, Tahaad, Pettiford. Big names with tough decisions to make. Quick break. Be right back. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute. But before we do, I have so many people that reach out and say, Torres, you give me hours and hours and hours of free content every day, every month, every year. What can I do to help support the show? Well, you want to support the show and look good in the process. Make sure to check out and support the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. Some of you wondering, what can I get in that merch store, Torres? Well, Kentucky fans, we got our Mark Pope Hope and Pope t-shirts. That is right. Mark Pope, monster first year. Year 2 is going to be even better. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirt at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is coming. It is here. John Calipari has things rocking. Get your Big Pig Invasion tees. Again, aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. St. John's fans, we have our Big Rick Energy t-shirts. And if you're just a college basketball fan in general, guess what? Your March is for Day Drinking shirt. That is the shirt that you need year-round, but especially for the next NCAA tournament. You can order yours now. By the way, football fans, we got you covered too. Auburn fans, we already know the freeze warning has hit the plains. Make sure to get your freeze warning t-shirts. Also, Nebraska fans, new era, new rules, the t-shirt that you need before the start of this coming season. And oh, by the way, if you're a Colorado fan, if you're just a Coach Prime fan, we have our Dion shirts and hats, more of them than we know what to do with. So to check out the full line of Aaron Torres Media merch and also support the show, good news is we're going to have even more for the fall. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And for more information, you can always reach out at Aaron Torres. All right, everybody, I'm back. Good to be back. Wow, the chat is humming, people. I will get to some of your questions in just 1 minute. I already see people arguing, so I don't even know where the argument began or ended, but we will keep the conversation on the NBA Draft Combine coming with some of the other news and notes over the last couple days. First piece of news that I really kind of want to dive into. I think it has been a very interesting couple days for Yaxel Lendeborg, of course, who, in my opinion, Yaxel Lendeborg was the number one player in the transfer portal this past spring, okay? So I've told the story, but, listen, my job, kind of pay attention, see what's going on, who could potentially enter, who's this, who's that. And you started to hear Yaxel Lendeborg's name more and more, played at UAB, averaged 17 points, 12 rebounds, 4 assists, about a block and a half and a steal and a half, 6'9". And like I said, it was like January, maybe early February, where it was like everybody was like, is this kid going to enter? Where would he consider? I think he'd be the number one player in the portal. Listen, we don't have to like the current state of college sports, but I guarantee, if you're a fan of a blue blood, your staff was looking into Yaxel Lendeborg. And as I said, when he entered the portal, it was like Christmas Day in some of these coaching offices. It was like when a star NBA player hits free agency, or when you get the number one pick in the NFL draft, or when you think you could get the number one pick in the NFL draft. And so Yaxel Lendeborg, great player, enters the transfer portal. He does commit to Michigan with the big caveat that he is still going to go through the NBA draft process, and he could potentially end up staying in the NBA draft. Now, by the way, that was a risk that I guarantee you every staff that was recruiting him was willing to take. We'll be happy to take his commitment in March and April, even if we're going to have to sweat all the way through maybe the NBA draft deadline to see if we can get him to campus. Well, I bring it up because sweat is what you are probably going to do, because Yaxel Lendeborg has been at the NBA Draft Combine and he has been balling. He has been showing why many people believe that he is going to be, if he returns to college basketball, one of the best players in the country. He's the biggest reason I have Michigan as a top 5 team coming into next year. So what are the updates on Yaxel Lendeborg? 2 different updates. I have sound for one, not sound for the other. Blame producer Matt. His flight is taken off, and we couldn't get him to get the second piece of sound in. But this was Yaxel Lendeborg early in the week. Remember, he is in the NBA draft, committed to Michigan. If he returns to Michigan, Torres has him as a top 5 team. Here is what he had to say early in the week about his decision to return to college basketball.
Where do you stand with the draft combine versus Michigan?
Man, I am more in between than I can be, to be honest. I took the visit to Michigan. The visit was amazing. I really loved it. I would love to play there. And then the NBA thing is just, the all be all. So it's like 50-50, maybe 60-40, so.
Who's got the 60?
Oh, that's tough. That Michigan.
All right, so when do you think you're going to decide?
I think I'm going to use all the 8 days, 18 days, 10 days I got left. How many days? Yeah, I'm going to have 10 days left. I'm going to use all 10 days to make that decision.
And what do you think will be the deciding factor?
Just how comfortable I feel, whatever brings me the most peace.
And if you were at Michigan, what kind of impact would you have?
Well, I set goals for myself. If I go to Michigan, I would want to win Big Ten Player of the Year and at least get us to the final.
So that was early in the week for Yaxel Lendeborg, of course, committed to Michigan. And first of all, I thought just in that there was some interesting notes. One, he said, first of all, the 60-40 thing is what caught everybody's attention. That was courtesy of Andy Katz, who always does a great job covering college hoops in the NBA draft. But 60-40 that he's going to Michigan. But then I thought there were 2 other interesting things. One, that he may take this all the way to the deadline. It looks like, what is it? May 28th is the deadline. So I think he's got like another 2 full weeks if he really wants it. By the way, this is always subject to change. I always like to make that as a reminder, make that as a heads up. But he could decide today that he's staying in the draft. But I bring it up because that was early in the week, 60-40, taking it to the deadline. And also, I thought the last part was interesting too. If I go to Michigan, I'm going to be Big Ten Player of the Year and put Michigan in a position to make a Final Four. Anything less will be considered a failure. So that's the kind of player he is. That's how much he believes in himself. But here's where it gets concerning if you're a Michigan fan. Later in the week, he did an interview after Wednesday in which he dominated. And he actually referenced the 60-40 quote. He said, quote, this was on Wednesday, by the way. He said, quote, I know I just said 60-40 with Michigan, man, but this whole process is really opening my eyes. I feel like now I'm definitely equal. I'm super stuck, quicksand, whatever you want to call it. I'm stuck in between for sure. This whole NBA thing has been insane. I'm pretty even. I love Michigan, the idea of going over there and developing, but the NBA is what everybody wants, so I'm dead in the middle right now. It's hard. Listen, first of all, I don't want to. This is tough for everybody, okay? And I think we all, and I can be guilty of this too, is I think we all go into these things thinking, oh, this kid's definitely going in. This kid's definitely returning. This kid is definitely doing something. It only takes one call, one conversation, one whatever to completely flip things on your head. And by the way, I know fans get frustrated at this time of year, but here's the truth. This is a life-altering decision for Yaxel Lendeborg, and he should take as much time as he wants. The good news is he's got two great options between Michigan and the NBA, but he should take as much time as he needs, because the truth is there's no wrong answer as long as it comes from his heart and he does what he wants. But I will also say this, as somebody who has been following and covering this stuff for a long time, it sure does feel to me like that sounds like a young man that probably wants to stay in the NBA draft. Now, what's interesting, but first of all, by the way, because I know Michigan fan, oh, Torres, you're just you don't like my school. You want him to leave. No. I want Yaxel to come back, man. Because one, I just want America to see how good he is. Two, I'll just be transparent. I'm going to Vegas Memorial Day weekend. I got a little cash put aside for a Michigan future that I might throw a couple bucks on, but I'd like to know next weekend if he's coming back or not. Memorial Day weekend is already next weekend. So we'll see if we have some details by then. But again, this goes back to what I said a minute ago with Carter Bryant. Is I do think a lot of these kids come in thinking, I probably am not ready and da-da-da-da and this and that. But then again, you get wined and dined, you're flying all over the country, you're around NBA people, and you get caught up in what it could be. Now, the thing with Lendeborg, it's a lot different than Carter Bryant. Okay, by the way, I think I say Yaxel's last name wrong. I think it's Lendeborg. So if I'm saying it wrong, Yaxel, and you're watching, I apologize. But the difference between Yaxel and Carter Bryant is he has a much more interesting and in many cases much more dynamic situation because he is not a guaranteed first-round pick. Now, I think he will go in the first round. If the NBA draft was tonight, 30 players have to be selected. I think he would be one of those 30. But he is not a guy that's guaranteed. And even if somebody gives you a guarantee, when you're in that 20 to 30 spot, you just never know what's going to happen. You don't know who's going to fall. You don't know who's going to rise. You don't know who's going to trade into the top, into the first round, trade out of the first round. And all of a sudden, things can go haywire really quick. So this isn't Carter Bryant that's going to be a top 10, top 15 pick. It's not whoever, Cooper Flagg, Dylan Harper. This is a complicated situation with no easy answer. Now, the good news is, like I said, he's got two very interesting options depending on what he chooses. Behind door one is the NBA. Now, behind door two is a very big bag at Michigan and a very, I think, very, opportunistic situation for him at Michigan. Now, I thought it was interesting. In his comments on Wednesday night, he said it's not about the money, and I actually believe that. I think he's going to make money either way, and it's going to be, frankly, life-changing money. It's either going to be life-changing money in college or life-changing money in the NBA. But the issue becomes with Michigan, what they're really trying to sell him is, one, come here and we're going to take care of you. That's one. I was told, over the last couple of weeks that, Michigan basically told him, we'll make sure that you are one of the highest compensated players in college basketball. But two, I don't think it's about the money for him. Michigan's sales pitch is, dude, you could be the 27th pick this year. You could be the 22nd pick. You could be the 35th pick and have no guaranteed contract. Come here. You saw what we did last year. We made the Sweet 16 in year one under Dusty May. We won the Big Ten championship. Danny Wolf was a transfer like you. We turned him into a first-round pick. So come here, and you'll go from maybe the 27th pick, maybe the 36th pick, to, you're going to be a, top 10, top 15 pick a year from now. And so that's where it gets complicated, but it also comes back to what Yaxel said, which is that, it's about development, but it's also about getting to the league. And I'm here. I'm on the doorstep. And that, to me, is probably what made me feel like that he is probably going to stay in the draft. Now, we will see over the coming days. The good news is, as I said, Michigan is a great option. And frankly, again, I think it's harder to get the guarantee that you're looking for if you're in a position like him. And Michigan fans, since I know you probably think I'm being negative, let me say this really quick. If he comes back, I believe they can do everything that he said. I have Michigan as a top 5 team right now. I actually am his number 2 in the country behind Purdue because I believe in Yaxel that much. I like Elliot Cadeau, point guard. I know he's gotten a bad rap, but when he's your 5th scorer, he can be pretty good. Namari Burnett, Roddy Gale, Adai Mara. Can you imagine Adai Mara and Yaxel Lendeborg together? Adai Mara, Yaxel Lendeborg, and Merez Johnson as your front court. So I really like this group that Dusty may put together, but it all hinges on Yaxel Lendeborg. He said he went from 60-40 to 50-50. I'd say it sounds pretty 50-50 that he's going to stay in college. Selfishly, I hope he does, but I hope he does what he thinks is best. That is your Yaxel Lendeborg update. Man, oh man, he is a fun player to watch. I'm being selfish. I hope America gets to see how good that kid is because he is special. All right. One more big topic that I do want to get to, okay? And it involves a program and a fan base. I don't think North Carolina fans don't like me. I think what it is with North Carolina fans is that I'm realistic about their program, and I think honesty hurts sometimes. You know, it's funny. I get accused of being a homer of so many different teams and so many different schools, and Torres, you kissed Dan Hurley's butt. Well, Dan Hurley just won 2 national championships in the last 3 years. Oh, you kissed Mark Pope's butt. Well, in year 1, Mark Pope went to the Sweet 16, and when he had a healthy team, he beat Florida. He beat Duke. He beat whatever. He beat, I can't even remember who they beat in the early part of the season. They beat Florida. They beat Duke. They beat Gonzaga. They were awesome. Like, you want me to be critical of Mark Pope when he had a top 5 team when he was fully healthy? So the point I'm trying to make is I think Carolina fans, I think some of them get mad at me. But I think the counter to that is I think some of them appreciate the honesty. And right now, I'm still trying to figure out what North Carolina is doing, okay? And I go back to a few weeks ago. I did a segment where I basically broke down the entire roster. And I said, look, this was a very crucial offseason for the North Carolina Tar Heels. And it was an offseason where they raised a bunch of NIL money, where they hired a GM, Jim Tanner, an agent from the NBA world who had North Carolina ties. And the expectation was, we're full speed ahead in the portal. We're going to crush it. We're going to come in with a top 5 team next year. And I've said it, and I believe it. I don't think North Carolina on paper is better today than they were at this time last year when they had all these guys, including Drake Powell. And so the news item today is that Drake Powell, former 5-star McDonald's All-American, played 1 season at North Carolina. He is another player that officially withdrew from college and is staying in the NBA draft for good. Said, I'm all in. I'm done at Carolina. And I don't really want to use this to have a conversation about Drake Powell. I think he's a fringe first-round pick. I think he's a developmental player. I think he's probably 2 years away from being a year away. In other words, I don't think he's anywhere close to being a contributor in the NBA. But I do want to use this as a conversation to talk about what the heck is going on at North Carolina. Because, again, I don't think they're any better. And let me also add this. He had a quote that I think if I was a Carolina fan, I don't know that I would be thrilled to hear this from a player who just decided to leave after a relatively forgettable freshman year. He told the media, and I think he was trying to be a little bit protective because I think he likes that staff, but he said, quote, I feel like I'm the same two-way player that I was coming into college. Obviously, I don't think I got to showcase that at UNC, but the potential is still there. I'm ready to learn as much as I can and continue to grow. Now, listen, I'll say this. I'll defend UNC. There's always a little delusion with there's delusion with everybody, right? I mean, you ask me, I think I'm the best to ever do this, that, the other thing. So I think there's a little bit of delusion in all of us, but I think there's a little delusion in him. I think he got plenty of a chance. I don't think he was good enough offensively. I think he was too loose with the ball. I don't think he shot well enough. But I will say the tools are there. He tested off the charts. And so, yeah. So he's gone. Don't love the comments, but I think it speaks to a conversation about North Carolina because, as I've said twice now, and we're going to get to some of the other guys in this draft in just a moment, but as I've said, I don't feel like North Carolina is a fundamentally better team than they were at this time last year, and that's a big concern. Ian Jackson, I know he had his faults, but goes into the portal, goes to St. John's. If Ian Jackson was terrible, St. John's wouldn't have wanted him. But he goes to St. John's. Elliot Cadeau just goes to Michigan, as we just said. A couple other guys graduate, R.J. Davis, etc. Drake Powell decides to stay in the draft. Beyond that, the portal stuff has been a little bit underwhelming. Now, I like Henry Visar a lot. Henry Visar was at Arizona, Didn't play a lot early when Krivas was healthy. Krivas gets hurt. Henry Visar steps up, averages close to 10 points a game, about 5-6 boards, block and a half, and he shoots the crap out of the ball. I think he's probably one of the 10 or 12 best players in the portal. By the way, I'll probably have my full portal rankings at this time next week. But Henry Visar was awesome, okay? I love that pickup. I'm more of a Jaron Stevenson guy than everybody else. I've seen what he can do when he's given an opportunity. He had 19 points in an Elite Eight game against Clemson to send Alabama to the Final Four. He's the big transfer outside of Visar. I like Caleb Wilson, the 5-star freshman. But who else do they have? Oh, Kyan Evans. Kyan Evans, the guard from Colorado State. I like him. I also just don't think that's enough. And if I'm being totally honest, even in the ACC, which I think is improved, but I don't think is anywhere close to the Big 12, the SEC, the Big 10, I look at North Carolina, and it's a struggle to find a top 25 roster there. Again, no Drake Powell, no Ian Jackson, etc. You replace him with a guard from Colorado State who was good, shoots the ball well, but I don't know that he's a guard that's going to take over the ACC. Caleb Wilson and Jaron Stevenson are both good, but I feel like they're kind of the same player. And then also Henry Visar. And so to me, this is what I want to do now. I want to look ahead a little bit. And I do want to be glasses half full, Torres, because I feel like I'm too negative on Carolina all the time. And I will say, there are still some good options for Carolina out there. What'll be interesting to me about Carolina is this, do they have enough NIL money, and can they convince one of these guys that's still in the portal that it's worth going to Carolina next year? Now, by the way, that Drake Powell quote probably doesn't help, but I don't think it really matters. And to me, I will say I will defend Carolina because I need to see their full offseason before I make judgment on them. And I think there are two players that could change the perception that I have of this offseason because, again, to me, it's important that they add one more guy like a dude, like an alpha, like a guy that can take over games, like an all-ACC 18, 17 points per game guy. And those guys are still out there. I think the two obvious ones, the first one is Jameer Watkins. Now, Jameer Watkins is an interesting story. 18 points per game, played at Florida State the past couple years. Actually declared and withdrew last year, declared this year. He is in the portal as well. And he's an interesting player because he said in all his interviews, he's been full speed ahead on the draft. And he is a guy that, he said publicly, I haven't talked to any schools. I'm focused on this draft process. Problem is, I don't know how focused the draft process is on him. 6'7" wing, who's a very good college basketball player. He's also like 24 years old. So he's not the kind of guy that you draft at 19 and you develop him for a year or two and you got a superstar on the back end. I think he's kind of a finished product. Doesn't mean he's not a good college basketball player, though. And if I was North Carolina, I'd be doing whatever I could to get him out of the NBA draft, back to college basketball, and say, hey, come to North Carolina and be a freaking star. Because if you come here and you're the difference between us being whatever and us being an ACC tournament contender, one, the NIL money is going to be great. And two, you're going to be a heel for life. That's a great setup. And I think he has that kind of talent. And I think, frankly, he's the kind of guy that needs, I hate to say it like this, but it's the truth. I think he just needs better teammates around him. He's a guy that tries to do too much sometimes because he just didn't have a lot of help around him at Florida State. You put him with Henry Visar, you put him with Kyan Evans. I think all of a sudden that becomes a much more interesting team. I think the other guy with Carolina that becomes very interesting to me is Boogie Fland. And we did a Boogie Fland segment, on Tuesday night? I guess it was maybe Wednesday morning when he officially withdrew from the NBA draft. And I'll be honest, I do think Florida is the school to beat there, and I said as much in that video. But North Carolina, to its credit, did reach out. I believe it was Tar Heels Illustrated was the first one to report that. And if you're North Carolina, go all in on Boogie. Now, listen, I understand that bringing in Boogie does create some of the same problems that you had last year. Should have mentioned Seth Trimble will be back this year. But you have Kyan Evans. Boogie's one of the smaller guards, and I think part of the problem this year was your guards were too small. But that dude was one of the best guards in the SEC when he was healthy. Now, again, I know people have their concerns and their qualms with him. He was averaging 16 points and 6 assists and leading all freshmen in assists when he got hurt. You put him in the ACC. By the way, he was doing it in the SEC, never forget. You put him in the ACC where, yeah, there's some good teams. There ain't 14 NCAA tournament teams in that conference next year. You put him in the ACC, I think he instantly becomes one of the best guards. So to me, it will be fascinating to follow what happens at North Carolina now. Because again, I want to be fair. I don't want to be too critical. I don't love the roster now, but guess what? It's only May 15th. There's a possibility Jameer Watkins comes back to college. There's a possibility Boogie Flan comes back to college. By the way, I always say this stuff is always subject to change, so we'll see what happens. You could, by the time you watch this video, Boogie Flan might be committed. I don't know. Now, my thought, I've said from the beginning, I think Florida is the school that makes the most sense for him. You just look at the timeline. You look at the fact that they stopped recruiting Desmond Claude. I don't think they do that if they don't feel pretty good about Boogie Flan. But I don't want to judge Carolina until I see the totality of the roster. But I'll be real right now with this roster. I had to do some mental gymnastics to get them into my top 25. But I'm just here to say they have some work to do. They need to add one more dude as far as I'm concerned. Really quickly, some other news and notes from across the combine. The guy that actually played very well here on Thursday, Otega Oweh. Otega Oweh from Kentucky. It's interesting. We didn't get a chance to comment on his comments, but if you remember late last week, Otega Oweh had a comment about, I'm all in on the draft. And I think that scared a lot of Kentucky fans, and I get it. Otega Oweh, by the way, I think everybody watching knows that, he was Kentucky's leading scorer this past season. He was their most consistent player this past season. And I thought, frankly, I've said it many times, I thought he was just frankly much better than I realized that he actually was coming into Kentucky. He played really well on Thursday. To me, I don't see right now with a guy that even with an improved 3-point percentage is a first-round type talent. And if you're not a first-round type talent, why are you rushing into the NBA? There's always reasons, but especially in this era where we know Kentucky is going to take very good care of you. So we'll see what happens with Otega Oweh. Again, I didn't even get to finish my thoughts. Sorry, I apologize. We're 41 minutes in off the top of my head, and I'm producing. But Otega Oweh, he said that comment about I'm all the way in. And I think a lot of people got worried about it, got concerned about it, whatever. And I just sat there and said, listen, I think everybody, if you're going to test the process, be all in. Be focused. Try to be the best version of yourself. You can be on the court, in interviews, off the court, all that. But Otega Oweh, to me, I think he comes back. And when he does, I think Kentucky is a legitimate top 5 to 10 team and a team that is good enough to compete for a national championship. Beyond Kentucky, a couple other notes. Tahaad Pettiford, he's one that's playing really well. Tahaad Pettiford, guard from Auburn, freshman this past year. He was Auburn's 6th man. And I think, but I'll say this, I think the assumption with Tahaad Pettiford was, well, he was good, but he's coming back to college basketball. He's a little bit on the smaller side, about 6'1", a Jersey kid. UConn recruited him pretty hard early on, so I kind of got to know his game a little bit, so I love him. But off the bench as a freshman, 12 points per game, 3 assists per game, and oh, by the way, shot 36% from 3. So he'll be interesting because he has said definitively, I want a first-round guarantee. If I don't get it, I'm coming back. I don't know that somebody's going to give him a first-round guarantee because we talked about it. It's a lot more complicated, I think, than a lot of people think that it is. So Tahaad Pettiford, to me, will be a fascinating one to follow. Cedric Coward, by the way, I should mention with Tahaad Pettiford, they don't get him back. They are in deep, you-know-what, because I think most of that team is built around the idea that he is their point guard for next year. Maybe they can make a late push for Boogie Flan or somebody, but they would be in tough uphill battle to figure out their roster if Tahaad Pettiford leaves. A couple other names, I'll tell you this: Carter Knox, Arkansas, really good player that I don't know is ready just yet. We're going to discuss him later because Calipari talked about his roster on the road show, so we'll discuss that in a minute. But I would expect him to be back at this point. The only other name that's really catching my eye at this point, Cedric Coward. Cedric Coward, who played at Washington State. We've told the story. D3 kid to Eastern Washington, to Washington State, averaged 17.5, 8 rebounds per game, but only played 6 games. Ends up taking a red shirt because of a shoulder injury. He commits to Duke. Every piece of intel coming out of Chicago this week is that Cedric Coward will not be back to college and is not going to go to Duke. You feel bad. He even said, people think I'm trying to leverage Duke for something. He's like, no, it's just I have 2 great options, but I need to figure some stuff out. And right now it feels like he's leaning towards the NBA draft. So we will see what happens with Cedric Coward, but those are the big names at the NBA draft combine. All right, so what I want to do, I want to take a quick break, come back. When we do, I want to talk about a few things. One, Mark Pope had a press conference last week, and he said, or last couple of days, he said something that absolutely caught my attention in terms of what he thinks about his job, this program, and what's next. And then from there, we'll talk about John Calipari. He had a road show where he talked about something about this upcoming roster that I think has the Arkansas fan base divided. Quick break. Talk about them both next. Be right back. What's up, everybody? It's AT, and listen, long day of podcasting. Sometimes don't always look the best. So look at this. It's a little bit not great, okay? Well, here is the great news. The great people at Firebox said, Torres, you're a professional. You just got 50,000 subscribers on YouTube. You need to look better. And so they sent me a couple awesome things. I want to pull them out for you right now. This is all from the winter collection, by the way. Spring collection is coming out. We got the vest, very, very, very nice. The sweater, very professional for when I go to professional events. We got these nice blue jeans. I think the question now everybody's asking is, Torres, how do you actually look when you put that stuff on? Let's find out. Well, what do you think? Sweater fits perfectly. Great for all occasions. When I go to games, when I go out to a dinner, warm weather, cool weather, it's perfect. Speaking of perfect, these jeans are phenomenal. Great for games, great for social events. Oh, by the way, a little bit stretchy if those New Year's resolutions aren't going on as planned. Really quickly, we got to try out. Let's try out the vest. It fits perfectly, not a surprise. So here's the deal. If you want to look as good as Torres, this is what I need you to do. I need you to go to Fioboc.com. That's F-I-O-B-O-C. Fioboc.com. And here's the best part. For listeners to the Aaron Torres pod, you get 20% off with code Torres20 at checkout. We also put a referral link in all of our YouTube videos. Thank you to Fioboc. By the way, make sure you're following them on social media at Fioboc. Thank you to Fioboc. You want to look as good as Torres, check them out. Again, promo code Torres. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. Final segment of the show. So good to be back. Do want to go ahead and wrap with a couple quick things that caught my attention. As I said, we were on the road. Producer Matt, by the way, has made another Fioboc commercial because that audio on that one stinks. So hopefully that gets fixed. We'll have some very cool content that I will share some details on later, sometime next week. Anyway, bring it up because there are two topics that I want to get to. The first topic that I want to dive into, I want to talk about something Mark Pope said earlier this week. So Mark Pope, Kentucky, I think they put together a hell of a roster, right? Mo Diabate, Jaden Quaintance, Reese Potter. If you missed the Reese Potter interview earlier this week, go back and listen. It was really fun. A lot of articles being written off of it, all of that. We're waiting on Otega Oweh, but as I just said, I kind of think he's coming back. Anyway, bring it up because at Kentucky, Mark Pope, as we're kind of waiting for this Otega Oweh news, he did do kind of a late season press availability, or late spring, early summer press availability now that his roster's mostly set. I thought it was interesting. He covered a lot of ground on a lot of different players. We might do a separate segment at some point on some of the stuff he said about some of his players incoming. But one thing he said that really caught my attention, I loved a comment that he had about the state of the program and what he wants it to be, okay? So the comment stemmed from, of course, we all remember, what was it, about 3-4 weeks ago? This crazy report comes out that Kentucky spent $20 million on their NIL budget. It was obviously ridiculous. We talked about it at the time. Well, I bring it up because Mark Pope was asked about it. He had a very funny response, but then he said something really interesting about the job and his responsibility as the head coach that I enjoyed. Let's take a listen to Mark Pope first joking, but then talking about his responsibility as Kentucky head coach.
This upcoming season, what you've had to put together and sign for the first time, re-sign from last season. What's the, you say, NIL valuation of your current roster?
It's close to $200 million. We would like to win at everything, guys. Like, we really would. This is the flagship program in the country. And so I'm fully on board with all of it. We want to play the hardest schedule. We want to play the best teams. We want to win the most games. We want to have the best players. We want to have the highest NIL. We want to have the coolest uniforms. We want to have the most media attention. Like, this is Kentucky. And we're going to do this the very best we can. And we
Can I just say, I loved everything about that Mark Pope quote. We are the signature program in college basketball. Yeah, we spend a lot in NIL, but guess what? We should be spending a lot in NIL. That's who we are. We're going to schedule the toughest games. We're going to come in. We're going to beat your butt. You're going to take it like a champ. You're going to take your medicine and deal with it because we're freaking Kentucky, baby. You know what that got me fired up to say? Oh, you don't even need me to tell you. First of all, make sure you're following our Torres on UK account, but you already know. Hope and Pope, baby. Hope and Pope. Get your t-shirt, AaronTorresOnline.com/merchandise. By the way, we have a couple back orders that are hopefully getting filled this weekend because those things have sold off the shelves. In all seriousness, though, I love this quote. And it was funny when I heard it. You know what I thought about when I heard this quote? I was thinking about when Mark Pope got the Kentucky job at this time last year. It was 11 months ago now. It was 13 months ago now, excuse me. It was middle of April. But even when that Kentucky job opened on that Sunday of the Final Four, we all remember where we were. I remember saying at the time, people were asking me, who's the best candidate, Torres? And, we did our list and we had some names that were realistic, maybe some that weren't. But what I said was, I don't care who gets this job. I don't care if it's Scott Drew. I don't care if it's Dan Hurley. I don't care if it's Billy Donovan. I don't care who it is. What I care about is, does the person understand the responsibility of being the Kentucky basketball head coach? Because it is a different job, as Mark Pope alluded to. I always say this about Kentucky. There's a lot of tough jobs in America. I'm a UConn fan. The standard at UConn is very high. Whatever. I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. Kansas, their fans don't have patience for losing. Louisville, you go on and on down the list. Indiana, you could say what you want. The fan base cares, and that's what you want as a coach. There is, as far as job pressure is concerned, though, there's only one Kentucky. And I mean that in a good way. I've said for years, Kentucky, to me, is the only college basketball program that I feel is covered like a college football program. And what do I mean by that? It means that with Kentucky, basically, what it means is essentially like every game matters. Every game means something. Every game we expect your best foot forward. We better win every game. If we don't win every game, you better have an explanation for it, right? Like that's how we cover college football. Ohio State loses. Doesn't matter if it's week 1 or in the national championship game. It's like, what went wrong? How do we fix it? How do we make sure it never happens again? Same at Alabama, same at LSU, same at Michigan, same at Tennessee, on and on. Kentucky's really probably the only basketball program quite like that. And so I go back to last spring and I just remember saying, like, just whoever takes this job, just understand what you're getting into, because it is a responsibility, but it is a great responsibility. And as I said that day, listen, I didn't love the process of how Mark Pope got hired, going through all these guys and then kind of hiring them in the middle of the night. But the counter to that is what I said. I said, wait till the press conference. And the press conference proved that he knew what he was doing and what he was certainly getting himself into. He comes off the bus with the championship trophy, calls out all his teammates by name, and you're like, oh, this guy gets it. What I also think is cool, he isn't just saying stuff like that. He's putting his money where his mouth is, okay? Clearly, from the NIL perspective, Kentucky, I don't know if it's number 1 or number 3 or whatever. They're right up at the top. And by the way, that's not an insult. That's a good thing. That's where everybody wants to be. That's not a bad thing to spend NIL money. It means that your fans care and your fans are supporting you and your administration is supporting you. Media coverage, yeah, there's no doubt. Top, a lot of people talk Kentucky. Scheduling. That to me is the most interesting thing, because Mark Pope's putting his money where his mouth is. Now, I know some of this is baked into the schedule. The Champions Classic, the Gonzaga series has been on the books. The Indiana series was on the books before he got there. But the counter to that is also that as far as the schedule is concerned, he's starting to put his own stamp on it as well. And he's not backing down from competition. The St. John's thing, listen, like they're playing St. John's. St. John's going to be a top 5 team. I'll defend Mark, but not defend, but I'll give Mark Pope credit for this. Like, yeah, it's really nostalgic and yeah, it's really cool. I also think he understands, like, we also have to win that game. If we lose to Rick Pitino, that ain't going to be good for my job, my blood pressure and whatever. And like, nobody's going to be saying Mark Pope needs to be fired, but it's like, yeah, he's your former coach and it's the 30-year anniversary of winning a national championship. But the expectation is not to go down to Atlanta and lose that game. So I give him credit for scheduling that game. That's obviously a game that only happens because of his relationship with Rick Pitino. And I'm so glad it's happening. I love the charity exhibition with Purdue. And he talked also about scheduling, where he basically said, yeah, we want to play everybody. We want to play everybody that we can, in conference, out of conference, do whatever we can. And that game right there, I think, is going to be a great litmus test and a great barometer. And it'd be easy. It'd be easy to play some D3 school or play, an exhibition season, another, low major school, whatever. But he said, no, Purdue might be the number one team in the country. You know what he said? He said, Aaron Torres has Purdue. Who does Aaron Torres have as number one in the country right now? That's who we want to play in the preseason. I'm being sarcastic, but the point I'm trying to make is Purdue is a really good team going into next year. And Mark Pope says, why do we got to wait until the Louisville game in the second week of the season to challenge ourselves? Let's go ahead and put the toughest game we can on the schedule. And oh, by the way, it's going to be great for the fans. Listen, I've been to Rupp Arena. I've been to Rupp Arena for big games. I know how great that place is going to be, even if it's an exhibition. That's going to be one of the best environments we have in college basketball all year, and it's going to be in October for an exhibition. So, I just give Mark Pope so much credit because to me, sometimes you take a job like this and you don't know what you're getting into. You try to hide in the shadows or, listen, these coaches want time off in the summer. He's like, no, I'm having a press conference in May. I'm answering all your questions. We're talking about it. I'm going on John Rothstein's pod. We're doing this full speed ahead. So Mark Pope says we want to be the best in everything. And I freaking love that attitude. Nothing but respect for Mark Pope. And not just, and by the way, some respect for Mark Pope too, for having some sarcasm and some humor with that conversation about the NIL situation at Kentucky. All right, do want to go ahead and wrap one last conversation, one last topic that I do want to dive into. Because again, a lot of coaches are having, press conferences and media availabilities. As I said, producer Matt and I were on the road over the course of the last couple weeks or last couple days, excuse me. We're going to have plenty of content from on the road as well. But I only bring it up because there is one more topic that I do want to get to because I saw this topic and I think it's worth discussing. That guy right there, John Calipari. So John Calipari, listen, we already know successful first year. And I think, the big thing that every Arkansas fan is waiting for is basically what's going on with Carter Knox. And so we will get to it in a minute. But why I want to talk John Calipari right now is because he went on the road this week as part of, the coaches' caravans that they do this time of year. And I don't know if every school is still doing them, but it's basically, hey, we're going to take the coaches, we're going to get to some places that maybe we don't get to on a regular basis. And so Calipari had, I thought, a couple very interesting updates from throughout the process. He talked about the fact that Arkansas itself is trying to schedule a charity exhibition. We were just talking about the Kentucky-Purdue charity exhibition. John Calipari said, we're trying to play Memphis at Memphis. That would be a great early season, preseason, exhibition test. I mean, listen, you guys and girls that are listening to this probably know the history and of the rivalry better. I know that the rivalry is no more. They used to play annually. They don't anymore. I believe John Calipari at Memphis may have had something to do with that, but I love that. Some other interesting updates from throughout from throughout the off season, including, by the way, roster construction. And that's what I want to dive into now, because to me, I think there's a very interesting conversation that I think has in many ways divided the Arkansas fan base a little bit. And I don't think it's like a toxic divided, but I do think it is a conversation that Arkansas fans are having about next year's team. By the way, I should mention, John Calipari did get a commitment from 2026, top 25 or so prospect JJ Andrews on Thursday evening, Arkansas native. I think that is a great fit. Probably a 2 or 3 year player with NBA upside. So that is a great fit. But I don't want to focus on the 2026, 2027 roster. By the way, it's crazy that 18 months from now, it's going to be 2027. Another conversation for another day. What I do want to talk about is next year's team, because I think there's a conversation. Even if you get Carter Knox back, should that be the last big piece of your roster? Or do you need like one more guy? You got some really nice pieces, but do you need one more guy to fill out the roster on top of the guys that you already have? John Calipari addressed that this week while he was on the road.
Well, it'll play out. I like what we have. I like where we stand right now. We have the ability to do more if we choose. Sometimes less is more. Like last year, we ended up playing 6 guys, 7 guys, and all of a sudden we're as good as anybody in the country. So we'll see how it plays.
Sometimes less is more. I will say this. That there's a big debate going on in the Arkansas fan base right now. Do you add a player? Do you not? Even if Carter Knox comes back. John Calipari does not sound like a man that is planning on adding anybody else. And so let's dive into the conversation. Should you add somebody? Should you not? And I'll just tell you exactly how I feel right now. I actually think Arkansas should not add another piece, assuming Carter Knox comes back. They essentially have like 10 playable players. I think you have to add, back-end depth for practice purposes. But in terms of like a star difference maker, I actually think they should probably stay put with where they are. And it's funny. I know what people are going to say. Oh, Torres, they need this and they need that. And listen, I'm not here to say they're a perfect team. There is, I promise you, I look at these rosters all day. There's no perfect team in college basketball going into next year. Houston isn't perfect. Purdue's not perfect. Whoever. St. John's isn't perfect. UConn's not perfect. There's no perfect team. And so, yeah, if Calipari was like, look, we need to add a little bit more shooting, I would support that. If you, I think maybe another, they have 3 primary ball handlers, but maybe just like a veteran guard just to kind of help out the young guys. You know how like NBA teams keep like a Udonis Haslem or, whoever, a Juwan Howard on their roster years after they really are good enough to play because you just want that veteran presence. I wouldn't hate that. But when I look at this Arkansas roster, assuming Carter Knox comes back, that's the last time I'll say it, I kind of like where they're at. You look at the pieces that they have. They have 10 pieces right now, okay? 10 guys that if they had to play today, they would feel comfortable at least playing to some varying degree. The guards, DJ Wagner, we know about him. Darius Acuff, 5-star McDonald's All-American, who was unbelievable on the All-Star circuit. I think he could be a breakout star in college basketball. Malik Thomas, another 5-star McDonald's All-American. Really, really, really good. On the wing, you have Carter Knox, again, assuming he comes back. Billy Richmond, who I thought played very, very, very well. The other good thing about Billy Richmond, you don't want him to play point guard, but in a pinch, you can survive with him for a few possessions. So he almost gives you kind of that bonus guard. Then you have Isaiah Sealy, 4-star wing out of Arkansas from Springdale. Not a guy that you want to go to war with for 32 minutes a night, but if you need 12 from him, I think you can get by with it. And oh, by the way, in the front court, you have Trevin Brazil, who I think is maybe the most underrated player going. We saw how good he was when he was actually given playing time late in the year when Adu Thero got hurt. Then you had the 2 big guys out of the portal, Nick Pringle, and also on top of it, Malik Ewan as well. So those are your 10. And let's talk about why I think you should roll with those. I think you should roll with those guys because probably to get most of those guys to either come back, commit, stay committed, you probably had to have these conversations months ago, okay? And so if John Calipari had conversations with all these guys months ago, excuse me, I've been sitting here for an hour and 10 minutes already, so I'm trying to just stay limber and stay loose. But John Calipari probably had conversations with these guys already. All these guys had options. Listen, we all heard the rumors. Could DJ Wagner hit the portal? Could Billy Richmond hit the portal? If DJ Wagner came back, would one of the freshman guards decommit and go somewhere else? And they all committed to be part of this team. And if you told them that this was what the team was going to look like, then I don't think you should be adding pieces at the 11th hour. By the way, I think you're good enough to win with the pieces that you have. DJ Wagner, 30-year point guard, college basketball. He was really good late last year. Darius Acuff, Malik Thomas are going to be really good. Carter Knox I think could make a jump into like an all-SEC type player. Billy Richmond played really well. Trevin Brazil played really well. Malik Ewan was a guy who averaged 14 and 9 in the ACC last year. So it's not like you don't have good enough pieces. It's just, do you want one more? And I don't see why you would add one this late unless something, inexplicable happened, most notably Carter Knox declaring for the draft. And so, I actually frankly don't even really get the argument. Again, if you want more shooting, okay, add an 11th guy that shot 43%, almost like Kentucky did this past year. Remember Ansley Almanor was like the 11th guy that they added at the last minute. They just said, we need more shooting off the bench. But to add a major piece, I just fundamentally disagree with it. And I know what people are going to say. People are going to be like, well, it's competition, deal with it. And I'm like, okay, I get that. But if promises were made, like, by the way, there's going to be enough competition with probably 7 to 8 guys on that roster that can play in the NBA someday. Maybe it's not 7, maybe it's 5, but you get the point. there's going to be plenty of competition already. And if you want to add depth pieces for practice, that's one thing. But so we're supposed to kick DJ Wagner to the bench after he helped you to the NCAA tournament for competition? We're supposed to tell Trevin Brazil go back to the bench because of competition? We're supposed to tell Darius Acuff, hey, you excuse me, your career, you're entrusting us with your career. You're going to be a one and done if things go right. But hey, competition, I'm sorry. Competition makes sense. Yeah, competition's great in JV high school football when you're trying to weed out bad guys, or, players that don't want to be there. But when it's real life, competition makes sense sometimes, but sometimes it doesn't. When you're dating a girl and you're ready to propose, you don't want to find out that there's competition from the guy she's working with. You just want to know that if I buy this ring, she's going to say yes, and I don't got to worry about it. Is that a little bit extreme of an example? Maybe, but you get the point that I'm trying to make. And so I don't buy the competition thing. I know what people say, oh, what about the injuries? Well, listen, they had injuries last year, and as Cal said, they played better when the bench got shorter. Injuries were not the reason that they struggled last year. Injuries were the reason they had success. So I could go on, but I stand with Cal. Now, the big caveat is if Carter Knox does not come back. Now, if Carter Knox does not come back, you absolutely have to add a piece. Obviously, at that point, we start talking about some of the guys that we've talked about throughout the show. Would it be Jameer Watkins from Florida State? Could you do Boogie Flan? Could you get Boogie Flan back? I think there's only one ball for all those guys. By the way, I see people like, oh, Boogie Flan played Cal. Nobody played anybody. Stop it. Boogie Flan was always planning to go pro. When he wasn't, he was going to get good money, but it shouldn't be at Arkansas. The best version of Boogie Flan cannot coexist with the guys on this team. So don't tell me, oh, Cal got played by. No, he didn't stop. But I don't think it'd be Boogie Flan. But could it be Jameer Watkins? I will tell you this. I know it for a fact. Cal's poked around on some reclassification candidates just in case Carter Knox does not come back. So we'll see what happens. I don't know exactly per se, but I do know that, why did I say I don't know per se? I do know. I know that he's poked around on reclassification candidates. I'm sure he has his finger on the pulse on guys if Carter Knox leaves. And if Carter Knox leaves, then we have that conversation. But if Carter Knox comes back, I like the 10 he's got. I would add some practice players, but I wouldn't go too heavy outside of that. All right, really quickly, we've gone a long time here. People are asking me, did he, let's see here. Did you mention J.J. Andrews? J.J. Andrews looks like a 2 to 3 year guy. Gump, did you mention J.J. Andrews? Listen, I'll be real. With J.J. Andrews, I know the 2026 class, but I'm still trying to figure out this whole portal thing and top 25s. But to me, super elite upside athlete, 2 to 3 year player that could be an NBA player. But I think here's the most important thing. He's an Arkansas guy. And so when you're taking freshmen, and you're taking freshmen that aren't going to play, I think you always have to be careful about taking too many. I'm not saying J.J. Andrews isn't going to play. I'm just saying he's probably not. If he's your best player, that could be problematic. If he's your seventh guy, that's great. And so, but if you're taking freshmen that aren't going to be superstars, that aren't going to be Cooper Flag, that aren't going to be AJ DeBonsa, Cam Boozer, et cetera, then guess what? What you need to do is make sure to take players that you think that you can retain year over year. Best way to do it, somebody with ties to the university. Taking a kid whose dad played football, who's from Arkansas, who grew up in Little Rock, that is a great, great, great kid to have in the program because, again, maybe he's your sixth or seventh man as a freshman, and then as a sophomore, which we're now talking about 2028, which is just sounds crazy to me. At that point, you're in a situation where, he's maybe a star, he's maybe an NBA player. By the way, for people who don't know who J.J. Andrews is, 4-ish, 5-star-ish 2026 kid. I don't want to oversell it. He's a fringe top 25 guy. Some services have him as a 5, some have him as a 4, but he committed to Arkansas earlier in the day. Let's see here. Nobody, my buddy Nobody, he says Knox coming back will make or break this year's team. Yeah, I agree. Tamara says we have 8 rotation players. He will add 1 to 2 more. I don't know. By the way, oh, man, I'm going to get so crushed in the comments because I forgot to mention the kid from Lebanon. They got a 6'10 kid from Lebanon who's 20 going on 21 years old. he is a big piece of what they will be doing next year. So they actually have a fourth big guy. I don't think you need to add pieces. Like I said, you want to add one dude that plays like 8 minutes a game and shoots a bunch of threes, that's fine. They got enough guys. I don't think you go crazy adding too many more pieces from here. Let's see. Everybody else, it looks like everything else is just arguments. All right. I'll tell you what. Comments section is getting a little wild, so why don't we go ahead and get out of here for the afternoon. If you're not subscribed to the Aaron Torres pod, please make sure to do so. I'm trying to get this question off the screen here. Give me a sec here. Okay. Tamara, we appreciate the question. All right. If you're not subscribed, Aaron Torres pod, please make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music, wherever you listen to podcasts, make sure that you are subscribed. Make sure to rate and review the show. Go ahead, give us a quick 5 stars. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, all that good stuff. By the way, I already got a text from somebody mad about some of my combine conversations. So that'll be a fun fire to put out after we get out of here. But yeah, I think we're going to get out of here for today. If you're not subscribed, make sure to do so. Again, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, we appreciate your support. By the way, plan is probably to do a Sunday, maybe Monday night show next. And there will be more to react to because the combine's going to end and guys are going to withdraw from the draft. Guys are going to stay in the draft and it's going to have impact and we're going to discuss it all. So we'll be back next week. By the way, Wednesday night, a major interview that I'm so fired up to share with you guys. We will share that on Wednesday. Time for me to go. Appreciate your support. I'm going to get out of here. Shout out to Torrent Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Reddick. You F-head, unblock me, bro.